Hello and welcome back to Freedom Tech Friday, a weekly live and interactive show hosted on the Ungovernable Misfits X, Noster, YouTube, Rumble, and Twitch feeds. We go live every week. We go live for 1 hour every Friday at 9 a.m. Eastern or 2 p.m. UK time. But you can also catch up later on the Ungovernable Misfits podcast feed. On Freedom Tech Friday, we like to cover the latest news and trends for anything relating to freedom technologies. That could be anything from Bitcoin or Monero, encrypted messengers, privacy tools, and everything in between. Essentially, if there's a news item, tool, or topic that can help you take back some control in today's digital panopticon, we want to talk about it. My name's Q&A, and I'm Head of Customer Experience at Foundation, where we build Bitcoin-focused sovereignty tools. And as always, I'm joined by my good friends Max, the head honcho at the Ungovernable Empire, and Seth, who is COO at Cake Wallet. This is a live and interactive show, and you can help steer the conversation by commenting live, pre-submitting your questions, boosting the show on Podcasting 2.0 apps, sending tips, or just sharing the show with your friends. Top support for the last show with Guy Swan comes from Rog at SC Bitcoin, who sent in 500 sats and said, important work, though I must admit that I didn't understand the details of how I would use any of it, obviously referring to the pair stack. Well, yeah, we'll have to see how that one unfolds. It's quite a new area of expertise. I'd be lying if I said I fully understood it myself, but thank you for your support, Rog. Without further ado, we do have a guest, a very important guest I'm going to bring up very shortly. But for now, Max, Seth, how are you doing?
Double muted.
Very good, mate.
Gets me every time. Doing well. Glad to be here, guys. I'm pumped for the double feature. Pumped to have Fluffy on here. Ooh, I leaked the guest. Oh no. But yeah, I'm excited.
Yeah, me too. Very excited, and excited to have Monero Monthly live. We've not done that before. So yeah, very good. Other than I'm drinking salt in my water because apparently it's healthy and it tastes like seawater, and disappointed by that.
Wait, you're drinking the salt, or you're just like gargling it?
No, I saw that somewhere, like, add a bit of salt to your water and it's good to like rehydrate you or whatever. And it might be true, but it's fucking disgusting. It tastes like drinking water.
That's a sad way to get your electrolytes, but it'll work.
You know, they do flavored ones nowadays, Max. It is 20.
Yeah.
I'm too tight for that, mate. I'm too tight.
Anyway, that feels like it's the topic of next week's show. Electrolytes, Freedom Tech Friday. Anyway, We digress, as always. Today, we are joined by none other than Riccardo Spagni. I hope I haven't butchered that, aka Fluffypony. Somebody who spent well over a decade thinking deeply about freedom money, privacy, and what it actually means to build systems that can survive or attempt to survive in an adversarial world. He's been there from the early days, helping Bitcoin and Monero to evolve, and is not one to shy away from the uncomfortable questions around privacy, the trade-offs, and where decentralized systems tend to fail under pressure. As Max alluded to just a second ago, this is a double-header show. The first part of the show will be more of a general Freedom Tech show, hence the name, Freedom Tech Friday. But at the top of the hour, Seth and Max will probably start steering the ship for a live recording of Monero Monthly. So we're going to be live for a total of 2 hours with Riccardo, which I'm very excited about. As always, quick reminder, this is a live and interactive show, so please be sure to drop your questions into the chat and let's dive into it. Welcome to the show, Riccardo. It is an absolute pleasure to have you with us. How's it going?
Thank you so much for having me. It's, yeah, so far so good, I guess. It's Friday.
Always a good start to a conversation when it's on a Friday, right?
Exactly. And I'm drinking a peach-flavored Monster, which doesn't taste anything like seawater.
That sounds delicious.
Yeah, a slightly better choice, I think. Max over there just downing ocean water for health reasons. So that's what you do when you escape the UK, I guess. Well, let's go ahead and jump in. Like you mentioned, we're going to kind of break it up into two sets of topics. I'll kick us off for the first one, but obviously we've known each other for a while. Fluffy, Riccardo, I don't know what you like to go by in these things. What do you prefer? You call it
Ricky, Riccardo, Fluffypony, FP. Hey, you over there, aren't you the Monero guy? Whatever. Whatever works.
I'll go with Monero CEO. How does that sound?
There we go.
We'll roll with that.
Payment officer of Monero.
Yeah, exactly. Your official title. Yeah, it's good to have you, man. I know a lot about you, a lot about your background, but I know that a lot of our listeners do not. So while it's a simple question, I'm sure you've answered it 100 times. We haven't on this show. So I'd love to hear a little bit about kind of why you got into the space generally, like into Bitcoin, into Monero, into Freedom Tech, and why you've dedicated so much of your life over the past 10, almost 15 years to freedom money specifically. Like, what excites you about this? Why do you think it's necessary? What got you to jump into this space with both feet?
Yeah, I mean, so by way of background, my dad was in IT in various roles growing up. When I was very young, he was in a more technical role, and then ended up more on the management side later on. But as a kid, I was very heavily exposed to all sorts of things. My dad would give me like when he upgraded something on his computer, I'd get the leftovers and I'd like tinker with hardware, and had a Commodore 64 was like the first thing I ever wrote code on. And, this is like late 80s. So writing code was all basic, and you would type stuff out from books and then it wouldn't work and you wouldn't understand why, because you're a kid, you're 8 years old, you don't know what you're doing. But like cutting my teeth on that led to me ultimately being a software developer and pursuing that as a career. But I always had this desire to find holes in the system and to break the system. And so, in the 90s especially, I was very influenced by things like 2600 magazine. And there was a 2600 South Africa chapter run by a guy called Sean, and we do these meetups once a month. And I got heavily exposed to things like FreeBSD, in an era where a lot of people were learning Linux. I was learning BSD, and that was it's very influential on me as a kid, and like what I consider to be robust, so like growing up in that environment and being so heavily exposed to a lot of really interesting things in InfoSec. And then, being South African and having been exposed to things like apartheid and, which my parents were very against. And so I went to a mixed school at a time when they were hard to come by. And I think like a combination of all of that really led to me being hyper interested in the edges of the system, where the holes are. And even now, like I've developed over the years reasonably strong adversarial thinking, and I often see issues, sometimes in physical security, sometimes in, architecture or descriptions, systems descriptions. I'm like, hey, I don't think that's a good idea. I think it'll break, or I think it's not going to work, and here's why. And I think like as a result of all of that, I was drawn to a lot of freedom enhancing tech in the early to mid 2000s. I was very interested in encryption, and got involved in a lot of cryptography. Learned about things like the Clipper chip at a time when I think outside of like deep InfoSec circles in the US, a lot of people were unfamiliar with the Clipper chip's existence as a whole. So, seeing stuff like that also, and combined obviously with growing up like in apartheid South Africa, I think I developed a bit of a anti-authoritarian stance. I'm not like down with the government and, rah, I'm going to go out into the street with like a gun or a flag or whatever. I mean, I think there's not much that I as an individual can do to change the status quo there anyway. But I'm very opposed to overreach. And I saw a lot of that growing up. I continue to see a lot of that, not even from governments necessarily. Sometimes it's from corporations, where I'm like, what are you guys doing? Like, what are you trying to accomplish here by creating such a restrictive environment for people, for your users, or for other people? So all of that to say that I ultimately discovered Bitcoin in early 2011. I think it was May 2011. There was a Slashdot post about a Google developer, Google engineer, who was building a Bitcoin library. And I think I'd, at that point, I'd maybe read a couple of things about Bitcoin, but had largely disregarded it. And that Google engineer was Mike Hearn. He was building the Java Bitcoin library. And I don't know, it's 2011, Bitcoin engineers, Google engineers they carried weight. And I was like, wow, if a Google engineer thinks this is important, maybe I should pay attention to it too. And that was sort of how my crypto journey started.
Yeah, I love that it was actually born out of real perceived need for you, but also just for people more generally to have access to this kind of stuff. It kind of strikes me a little bit as the crypto anarchist approach to things, which has always resonated with me, of maybe we're not going to overthrow a government with this stuff, but what we will do is we'll let anyone who wakes up to the need for freedom have the tools to be able to carve out their own little haven, to be able to do what they need to do, communicate with who they need to communicate, regardless of what the situation around them looks like, which does slowly undermine authoritarian regimes, which is a double win. But yeah, definitely strikes me as a little bit more like crypto anarchist beginnings there, but also very early to Bitcoin, when I think there was a lot of idea of what that could be when it comes to freedom tech and freedom money.
Yeah, Ricardo, when you were saying, you're not one to go out with a flag and a gun in the street, but you are there to protect yourself. You're actually the first person I ever heard talk about Monero when I got involved in 2017. So thank you for that. When I first got involved, obviously it was a lot later than you, but it seemed as though, at least in Bitcoin, there previously was a lot more appetite for privacy tech, more of a focus on privacy. Maybe I've got that wrong, but did you feel that there was a shift after that time? And is that the reason you focus so heavily on Monero?
Yeah, so a couple of things that to comment on there. The first is, I am 100% a believer in tools existing to empower people. I think that I don't think it's possible to stop a corporation or a government from doing things that are untoward, whether it is intentional or sometimes accidental, and so instead, if we work on tools largely for ourselves because we want the protection and the freedom that it enables, then those tools will be useful to others. So yeah, you nailed that. In terms of the shift, it's unfortunate but very true. There was a lot of talk in the early days when I got involved with Bitcoin, whether it was on the Bitcoin Wizards or Bitcoin Dev RC channels, whether it was on Bitcoin Talk. I spent a lot of time in Bitcoin OTC, which was like an OTC channel on RC, and was heavily influenced. Well, a lot of my thinking was heavily influenced by the web of trust that was like an integral part of those OTC trades. The fact that you could perform a trade of real money and goods and services and whatever with some random person that you don't know, that you're never going to meet. It's all anonymous, and governed in a way by a web of trust was like highly influential. And I thought there was a pretty clear path at that point, especially like 2013, 2014, to Bitcoin gaining more privacy on a protocol level. You know, I was close to the AnonCoin guys. I thought AnonCoin was a valiant first effort at trying to add some privacy stuff to a Bitcoin fork that could then be backported to Bitcoin. You know, AnonCoin never really took it to the next level on like, you know, on-chain protection. But again, I think it was I saw it as like a stepping stone. And then for whatever reason, things started to shift. And I have theories about it, but I think one of the big reasons was people got rich. And they got rich and they changed from being the underdogs that were playing with a cool project, the people that were building out infrastructure and services to support this very young project that had very little in the way of infrastructure. They changed to being big, important businessmen and you know, women in crypto and all of that. And like suddenly it became an enterprise and it became commercialized. And we had something of a similar effect with the internet in the 90s. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the term Eternal September.
Yes.
Heard
Yeah.
about it,
Yeah. So Eternal September is this sort of weird pivot, a point where the internet changed in like the late 90s. So September 1993, like AOL started, was it AOL that started putting out their CDs then? I can't even remember. But basically like Usenet access just blew up. And like random people started like getting Usenet access, and that was sort of like the explosion from like it being a largely tech dominated space to now random people trying to use Usenet for online dating, you know, stuff like that. And that really to a lot of people at the time, it was like the destruction of the internet. And a little anecdote that I found, you know, again, I was a kid in the late 90s, still learning the ropes. But prior to 1994, you know, in the BBS days and then also like early internet, when you were talking to someone and they said they were a 20-year-old female in California, they were a 20-year-old female in California. Post Eternal September, if they said they were a 20-year-old female in California, they were a 55-year-old man. In like, yeah, exactly. So, you know, that it was so weird because like we just took everything at face value, and suddenly that shifted and changed, you know, and like and you had to learn to distrust people. And so, you know, like going back to the point I was trying to make about Bitcoin is I definitely felt that shift, that suddenly they were like, not everyone, but a lot of people were like, holy cow, I've made money. I'm wealthy now. I've made real wealth for my family and for me. And I think when you do that, you start to become scared. You know, you start to develop a fear of, how do I not rock the boat? Because if I rock the boat in any way, then the luck that has gifted me this wealth might run out. It was like all that talk of privacy evaporated, and then it was replaced with talk of, you know, protocol changes need to be made very carefully, and which is true, but you know, very carefully doesn't mean multiple decades. Like, you know, there's a path. There needs to be like this is where we're going. This is where we're aiming for. And I was a little bit excited when Blockstream launched Liquid, because I thought to myself, here's a model for privacy on Bitcoin. Like, it now exists. All we've got to do is take that and like backport it, you know? So like we just need someone to pick up the banner and go like, hey guys, like this is, here's the BIP for backporting CT and whatever from Liquid into Bitcoin. And let's set a timeline, 5 years, whatever, you know, but like, let's aim for that. And no one did. And that's not a knock on the Bitcoin developers, because, you know, the Bitcoin developers, a lot of the Bitcoin core developers rather, were the ones responsible for Liquid and for a lot of the stuff that went into it, you know, Greg and Peter primarily, as well as some others. But it just like, it's like, here's the cool science project that's just never going to make it into production, you know? And that really saddened me. So like, I didn't want to throw my weight behind something else. I didn't want to contribute to something else. And in fact, when I started, when I got involved with Monero, I was like, again, my thinking was, hey, this is really cool. We can take some of these principles and put it into Bitcoin. And the only reason that I even took on the lead maintainer moniker was because no one else wanted to do it. And I was like, hey guys, open source projects need a lead maintainer. They need someone who's going to like click the merge button. So I don't mind doing it, like, but someone's got to do it. And I think like probably 2016, 2017, especially, I realized that Bitcoin's never going to get on-chain privacy. It's just not, you know, maybe they might put some small things in with like the post-quantum cryptography, but the pushback is just too large. You know, too many people are afraid of what will the government do to our precious money if we do that. And that saddens me to say, but it is what it is. And I've also, you know, I've thought a lot about privacy on an L2 level, you know, and I've watched with interest what's happened with Lightning. And I think that aspects of Lightning are really remarkable. And I love the idea of ephemeral transactions. I don't think every transaction needs to be on chain. I think that that's a bad model in general anyway, which is why I'm excited about stuff like Greece on Monero. But I think the challenge here is that L2 is never going to be able to offer strong enough privacy guarantees, because ultimately there's settlement back on chain, and that's going to reveal things. And that notwithstanding, when you look at the level of sophistication that organizations like Chainalysis have, like they can set up all sorts of infrastructure to reduce the privacy that Lightning offers. They're able to run hundreds of thousands of Lightning nodes if they so desire, and peel the onion layers back from a lot of the routing that happens there. And yeah, we can build more things to try and defeat that, but privacy doesn't seem to be a focus of Lightning. It seems to be a byproduct. And I think that that's unfortunate, because I really wish that at the beginning, Lightning had been launched with more of a, hey guys, this is how we add privacy to Bitcoin, and scaling is a byproduct. You know, I think that would have been so cool, but that's just not where we're at. So yeah, I mean, I have lost a little bit of hope. I am a little bit disenchanted, and have been for many years with privacy on Bitcoin. And I don't know. I don't know if it's ever really going to change, you know. And I'll say one more thing about this, because I know I've been waffling now for a little bit. But one thing that also has really left me quite disheartened has been the sort of drumbeat of, you can just use CoinJoin through whichever client you love. The challenge there is we've seen and continue to see operators like exchanges and payment processors and so on prevent deposits that come from coin joins, even if that coin join is a few transactions back. And and that, the fact that the commercial side of the industry, which is a critical part of Bitcoin operating, is so hostile to coin joins, means that any hope of additional privacy is, that starts off dead. It starts off basically creating a secluded network where getting in and out of the network becomes increasingly expensive, and that's just not ideal.
Yeah, it's always been hard to kind of look back on Bitcoin's history. I like Max and Q both came in like 2017. So I came in about that same era, kind of right at the tail end of the hope for privacy improvements on chain and Bitcoin. But like when you look back at the history, like confidential transactions, 2013-ish, coin joins, 2013-ish, Liquid shortly after, you got some really fascinating innovations that were proposed for Bitcoin. And a lot of these devs still have been pushing privacy. I mean, Jay Maxwell continues to build and come up with really fascinating ideas for how you can improve privacy on Bitcoin, for instance. But you're right that it seems like once you kind of like human nature is you want to destroy the status quo until you're a part of it. And then once you become a part of the status quo, it gets very hard to continue to dismantle the broken system if in any way you're benefiting from it. And maybe getting rich on Bitcoin isn't necessarily becoming part of the status quo, but I think you hit on an interesting idea there of once people kind of are able to pull themselves up because of the wealth that Bitcoin has created for them, it can be a lot harder to continue wanting to upend the ship and change things in a way that could threaten your wealth or could threaten you. I mean, I've seen privacy developers, even CoinJoin protocol developers, go to jail for building privacy tech on Bitcoin. So it does kind of continue to shift the incentives as that price increase happens. But yeah, it's always been interesting to kind of look back at the history of Bitcoin and see all of these incredible developments that never ended up getting deployed. And then to hear from you, to hear from like Andreas Antonopoulos, I ran into a few years ago and was talking to him about that. And basically that same idea of like, he had a lot of hope for there to be core improvements that really changed the game when it came to Bitcoin privacy. But that a lot of that pretty much ended in 2017, and there hasn't been much real chance of getting anything across the line since then, which is sad. Obviously, there's still things we can do. Like you mentioned, Lightning has some good aspects to it, but it's tricky.
Yeah, it's so an interesting anecdote is I spent a lot of time with Peter Hitchens, who created 0MQ before he passed away, and he pointed me to a story that has subsequently been taken off the internet, although I'm sure it's archived somewhere. It was hosted on sealedabstract.com, and it was from the guys that forked 0MQ to create NanoMessage. And it was this 2016 post about like a NanoMessage postmortem. And effectively, what had happened were a handful of people in the 0MQ community and a couple of contributors were not happy with 0MQ. They didn't like some of Peter's decisions, not even like architecturally, but like they had various gripes. And so they decided to fork 0MQ and create this alternative called NanoMessage. And after a few years, NanoMessage just died. And then they tried to resurrect it a few years later, but this was in that which it wasn't very successful. But anyway, this was in that period where it was well and truly dead. And the postmortem goes, the reason that NanoMessage has died is because we all agreed that we needed to fork away from 0MQ. But the reason that we wanted to fork away from it varied. Everyone had different ideas about what was wrong with 0MQ. And so we didn't actually have a unified vision about like what we wanted from NanoMessage. So everyone then got together and all wanted to do different things, you know, their personal idea of like what needs to be improved in it. And ultimately the lack of like any unifying vision is what led to nano message dying. And I think sometimes it's a little bit like that, you know, it's the story of success with Bitcoin is that whatever gave you success, whether it is, you know, you're Brian and you started Coinbase, or, you know, you whatever built, you did Ledger. You know, I love all these people. They're great. They were an early part of my journey. I mean, I still have the Ledger prototype that I was given in like, man, I think it was like 2014 or whatever. You know, it's so like hacky and horrendous, but like I treasure that. But like once you found that success, then for you, Bitcoin and crypto in general becomes about preserving that success, you know, and everyone then focuses on what they personally see as the path to success and for furthering the success they've already had, rather than being part of the community and like, you know, working together. And I think the telling point for me was I was at a conference in it was Satoshi Roundtable, and I think it was 2015 Satoshi Roundtable. Might have been 24. It was the second Satoshi Roundtable, so it must have been 2015. And I'm sitting there with Brian from Coinbase, and I was like, can we, you know, we're doing like a little session. There was like 6 of us. I can't even remember who it was, but we're sitting in a group and we had to discuss a bunch of things about Bitcoin. And I was like, this is really useful. I know that we can't really publish like a transcription of this based on like, you know, because there's Chatham House rules. So you don't want to say like who's saying what. But this conversation between myself and Brian and a handful of others, I think Peter Todd was in that conversation or whatever, and Blue Matt, I'm like, this is like an incredible conversation of really cool things about Bitcoin. And so I said to Brian, like, hey, you know, Brian Bishop, like, can I dial him in? Like, we're in person, but can I like get him into this conversation on the phone? Because he types at like 200 words a minute and he can transcribe it. And because he's going to be like on the phone, he's not going to know who's saying what. So like the transcription will follow Chatham House rules. And Brian was like, who's Brian Bishop? And I was like, you know, I mean, this is like 2015. It's still relatively early. And Brian Bishop is Kanja, who is, you know, like anyone who's been involved in Bitcoin, at least at that time, knows 100% who Brian Bishop is, and what he, you know, like what he's done with Bitcoin and his contributions and so on. And you know, he, like Brian from Coinbase just had no clue who I was talking about, and I was like, damn, like you're that far removed from the industry already, and this was 2015. I don't expect anyone who's involved in Bitcoin, unless they're like Bitcoin core developers, to know who Brian Bishop is today. But you know, in 2015, like it was a different story. So, like that to me is just indicative of how easy it is to become disconnected from like that part of Bitcoin.
Yeah, I think it's kind of natural to natural kind of trajectory, I guess, as the net of people that, or catchment area that we call a typical Bitcoiner, continues to grow, that, you know, we get a watering down of the original ideas, which is something that I've personally wrestled with as I've become, you know, a bit more of a Bitcoin greybeard comparative to somebody, you know, joining in the last couple of years. Ricardo, obviously you were, you know, a core part of the early Monero community, and even, as you mentioned before, a maintainer of the project over the years. But you've always kept a little bit of a focus on Bitcoin as well. That's evident from, you know, the way that you speak about the project. You earlier in the conversation, you leveled some quite accurate criticisms of Bitcoin and Lightning. But I'm curious, what is there, if anything, that still excites you about Bitcoin and maybe even Lightning can come under the same sort of question, if anything?
Yeah, so I mean, good questions. I think I would say that the things that excite me about Lightning is the potential for more people to use Bitcoin. We might have lost that battle a little bit already, and I'll tell you why I say that. I deal a lot with what are they called? Freelancers in the global south, so Vietnam and Thailand and so on. And they might do like a little bit of work on like a project. Maybe they've got to go and like clip some videos for social media. And when it comes to getting paid, unilaterally, they all want Tether on Tron. Not just Tether on Tron, but like sometimes they'll just give you their Binance ID and they're like, hey, can you send it? Yeah. And I'm like, can you not give me an actual address? And then they'll give me a Tron address. And then I've got to like use a swap to like send a Tether on Tron, because like, who uses Tron? Turns out a lot of people use Tron, which is wild to me. And it's because of the fees, right? That they use Tron, and they use Tether because it's a stable coin. Now, potentially in the future, if Bitcoin becomes more of a unit of account, then something like Lightning will be palatable to that audience. Now, that's not where we're at today, but I sort of see that as the potential future. So that excites me. And then I think one thing that just more generally excites me about Bitcoin is the notion that it has provided accessible freedom to a large body of people. And I know that there are a lot of people that may not truly understand what that means. They hold Bitcoin because it's an investment in their mind. Maybe they hold it on an exchange, but enough people have been afforded the opportunity to hold Bitcoin in a non-custodial wallet and in a way that does not raise eyebrows in whatever jurisdiction they're in. And I think that that's really cool. So I'm not gonna complain about that. That's an awesome outcome of Bitcoin's existence. And I continue to believe that people that learn about Bitcoin now and hopefully learn a little bit more about like self-custody and that will discover other things, whether it's Lightning, CoinJoin, Monero, whatever, and hopefully won't pay that much attention to Tether on Tron.
Yeah, hopefully. What sort of role do you think Bitcoin plays going forward then, if it's not working in the way you probably initially envisioned, and it's not working in the way that I originally envisioned when I started getting involved either, and good people are starting to go to prison for creating privacy software on it, and like you rightly said, a lot of people who have got wealthy have sort of not necessarily turned their back, but changed their tone a little bit in terms of the importance of privacy and freedom, because they're now sitting comfy. What role do you think it plays? Do you see it as like a two-coin world where you have like spending on Monero and store of value in Bitcoin? Do you see it becoming more and more sooty, or like what's your sort of view going forward as you've seen so much of it growing up?
Yeah. I think that Bitcoin will hopefully remain relatively accessible. It's always going to be more accessible than Monero, and in fact, I'd argue that it's definitely more accessible than Tether on Tron, to most people. I think that we've largely passed the point where regulators are trying to prevent Bitcoin from existing. Whereas if the US ends up like angering enough countries, then the dollar might not necessarily collapse, but it might be less enticing as a stable coin, and then USDT becomes less enticing. Now, I think that is maybe many decades away, but it's still a possible outcome. And so I would sort of argue that if you view it through that lens, then Bitcoin becomes the most accessible way to get into crypto, regardless of what you want ultimately. I also think that Bitcoin is in and of itself an asset class that was previously it just previously didn't exist. And so the fact that there are large institutions besides Sailor, I mean, like actual large old school, like, suit and tie institutions that are paying attention to Bitcoin and have people on trading desks that are paying attention to it on a daily basis. Like, that's huge. That is a level of relevance that I think cannot be understated. So that is something that is hugely important because I feel like it paves the way for other things. Now, I don't know if Monero ever becomes more broadly accepted on that, that sort of environment. But I do think that regulators have already realized they've lost control. They can't control Bitcoin. They can't freeze transfers on Bitcoin. Yes, they have a high degree of traceability, and I think that gives them a sense of comfort. But they can't prevent North Korea from sending or receiving Bitcoin as much as they'd like to. And so if they've reached a level of comfort with that, and they eventually reach a level of comfort with encrypted messaging, which, I know the US is fine with, the UK and Europe, not so much, Australia, not so much, but like the vast majority of the world has accepted that encrypted messaging exists, and they're not like outrightly trying to prevent it. Then potentially Bitcoin's acceptance now paves the way for Monero to be more broadly accepted by regulators. Perhaps not, but I mean, that's my hope. I do think that Bitcoin ends up being digital gold, which is the position it's already taken. And then I don't know what becomes, I think maybe most of the crypto market becomes like digital silver or copper or whatever, useful sometimes. Like maybe there's some money to be made, maybe there isn't, but it's not gold. Gold is it's like the gold standard. Like that's what you want to hold if you're an investor or a high net worth individual, or you're trying to like build a treasury with it. But I think that Bitcoin has probably lost too much ground to Tether on Tron and to Monero to be able to be a money, and that's okay. So yeah, to answer your question, I do think we end up with a multi-coin future where Bitcoin is the thing you want to hold. And my hope is that people, maybe with a bunch of like issues with Tether on Tron over time and funds getting frozen and so on, that people will realize that Monero is a preferable vehicle from a privacy perspective. Now, I think the one challenge that both that has prevented Bitcoin from being most useful as a money, besides privacy, is the unit of account thing. The volatility, and Monero is subject to the same volatility. For a long time, I used to joke that Monero was, the $140 stable coin, because every time it went lower than like $100, it would go back up, and every time it went above like, $160 odd, it would go back down. But those days seem to be behind us, much to my great dismay, because now I can't call it a stable coin anymore. But I do think that's probably something that ends up settling over time. I just think that the time horizon on that is very, very vast, and very large. And the reason I say that is because for something to become a unit of account, it needs to reach a level of global usage such that there's just so much volume happening of people trading with it and trading in and out of other assets, that it has this sort of like net effect of it not being particularly volatile. And that's not to say that like the dollar hasn't gone up or down relative to the euro or the rand or whatever. It just tends to do so a lot more calmly than Bitcoin or Monero. And so that's a testament to the amount of usage that it has, the amount of utility it has. So for Monero to reach a high enough level of utility that it does stabilize a bit and it can operate more as a unit of account, well, I don't know. I mean, that might take us another decade or two.
Yeah, those are some excellent insights there, and I largely agree that we seem to be hurtling towards a kind of multi-coin future, where we can leverage the different properties of the different coins for all of the different types of use cases that you just mentioned. I wanted to spend the last 10 minutes of the Freedom Tech Friday portion of the show to kind of talk more generally about Freedom Tech, and more specifically your Freedom Tech stack. To the extent at which obviously you're comfortable talking about it, what does your Freedom Tech stack look like? What's your favorite messaging, email, file storage, so all those sorts of tools that you interact with day to day? And I ask that because we find ourselves in a weird dichotomy where the range of Freedom Tech tools available has never been greater, but converse to that, the amount of kind of surveillance or anti-Freedom Tech tools is also never been greater as well. So we find ourselves in a weird point in history, really. And I'm always curious to hear about other people who are share a similar mindset to all of us on the show here, as to what you guys use and how you see this kind of landscape playing out.
Yeah, great question. So a long time ago, I realized two things. The first is, it's really hard to do business and to even have any form of social life if you're going to insist on everyone meeting you where you are. So you have to sometimes, most of the time, meet them where they are. So stuff like using WhatsApp is unavoidable. Like you can take a hardline stance and go, all my friends can only communicate with me on whatever, Simplex or Signal or whatever. And what you're going to find is people just stop communicating with you. You stop getting invites to things when they have to do that. You like business becomes really difficult when you're refusing to use email. So I rationalized that a long time ago, and I decided to compartmentalize my life. And I split data into two buckets. The one is data that if it got out, if it was public, it might cause some damage, like private code repos for any of my companies. Like they're on GitHub. And if somebody like had to get access to that code. It wouldn't be ideal, but it's also not so disastrous that like my life would end. Versus something like my physical address. I consider that to be something that is a lot more sensitive. And so that goes in the second bucket, which is information that I really want to keep private. And as a result of that compartmentalization, I'm able to, I switch devices based on what I'm doing. So when I'm doing something that is sensitive, I have a separate set of devices to when I'm doing something that is not sensitive. So like my daily driver is a MacBook and an iPhone. And yeah, I mean, I've obviously gone to some lengths to lock it down. Although Apple does a fairly decent job of being not too bad on that out of the box. And there's a lot of guides on the internet on how to lock things down, how to lock Apple devices down, you know, how to enable encryption, you know, when to use iCloud, when to use local backups for your iPhone. So, you know, you can dig into that a little bit and operate in a fairly open manner on that, you know, with those devices, because you know that the information you're putting there is not critical. So I use that for like all of my, like most of my business stuff goes on those devices. All of my, you know, random conversations with friends or like social media, stuff like that. Happy to put it on those devices because, you know, if someone like hacks into my Instagram, they're not going to see anything interesting. If somebody looks through my photos, they're not going to see anything weird or compromising. And so I don't really care about that at all. You know, that's not to say that I'm like granting anyone access to it. But I think that the amount of protection it provides is commensurate with the level of sensitivity around that data. But then when it comes to a lot of other things, you know, my personal documentation, more sensitive business documentation, you know, like anything, a lot of like crypto related stuff, code to a lesser degree, because there's very little that I work on or contribute to where I'm deeply concerned about that. You know, I mean, when you're contributing to open source, then well, it's all open anyway, so it's not like anyone, like it's not like no one has access to the code. You know, all of that sensitive stuff goes on a separate set of devices. And in terms of the physical hardware, I've been a Purism owner for a long time. So I've got a Purism laptop. I think that the you know, and I've obviously upgraded it over the years and replaced it with newer versions. I think that there are several laptop manufacturers that are pretty decent. Framework is great. System 76 is great. I like both of those. Getting a decent ThinkPad, an older ThinkPad especially, is great. I can't say enough good things about Purism on the laptop side. And one of the things, one of the things that I love about Purism is they've got an anti-interdiction service. So when you order a laptop from them, you can say you can pay a little bit extra and you get the anti-interdiction service, and then like the CTO or the CISO, one of the two, reaches out to you like personally, and you have this whole GPG encrypted conversation to discuss the interdiction, anti-interdiction, and they paint nail polish on the screws, and you choose what color nail polish you want on which screw, and then they ship the thing to you. And when it arrives, you flip the laptop upside down and you're like, yes, the glitter nail polish is on that screw and the green nail polish is on that screw. And so, you know, all the nail polish colors match what I told them. And so I know that nobody physically tampered with that on a hardware level in between it shipping and arriving by me. And then they send separately a physical USB key called the Librem key, and that arrives totally separately, and it encrypts the entire boot on the laptop. So even like you need both devices. You need to intercept the laptop, and you need to intercept the boot key, and you then need to know how to recreate the nail polish. Oh, and by the way, they send you photos of it. And let me tell you something: recreating glitter nail polish so that it matches the high resolution photo that I have. Like, good luck with that. So that I think is it does take it to a little bit of an extreme. But anyone that is serious about their data, I strongly encourage going down that road. And then on the mobile side, so I have used Purism's mobile phone, Librem 5, for a while. It's okay. Like I don't know what else to say about it other than it's okay. It's very dated now. They have a new version called the Liberty phone. The reason I got the Librem 5 at the beginning was they had one that was made in the USA. So, like it was like hellishly expensive. I think it was like $2,000 or something. But it was fully made and assembled in the USA. So, like especially things like the secure storage chip, like there were no weird like off-brand Chinese chips put into it. It is very dated, and so more recently, I kind of got a little bit fed up with how dated it was, and I realized that I probably don't need to go that hardcore on the mobile phone side, because like I also want something that I can like carry around with me. And so there's a company called Volla phone, like Volla, and they have a phone called the Quintus. And the Quintus is it's like a modern Android smartphone. It looks and feels like a modern Android smartphone. Like the camera is fairly decent, the display is gorgeous, and it runs a fully unlocked version of Android, so fully rooted and whatever. And you can switch between that and what's it called, Ubuntu's mobile phone OS. I can't remember what it's called. Oh, Ubuntu Touch. So you can switch between like their flavor of Android, which is a modern flavor of Android rooted with their own launcher and so on, or you can use Ubuntu Touch. And the Volla has really served me well, because I realized once I switched to a phone that was a little bit more usable than the Librem, then I started using it more. And so now I have both of those, and those are my dailies. I've got both of those devices on me. I use the iPhone for all sorts of nonsense, taking random photos. The camera's obviously lovely, playing music, whatever. And then I have a whole separate set of apps and so on the Volla, on the Quintus, and it's a great device. I can't praise it enough. Again, it's rooted Android that I've had to then go and lock down further to my preferences. But it's an excellent starting point. And then on the laptop, in terms of OS, Purism does have their own variant of Linux, which is fine. I've tried it for a while and just went back to Cubes. So Cubes is a flavor of Linux where every single app runs in its own virtual machine. And so it's a bit clunky. It means that, getting data from one app to another is a bit more laborious because they're totally sandboxed from each other. And there is a shared like root file system and whatever, but you have to imagine it as like multiple machines. Imagine you literally had a physical laptop for editing a document and then another laptop for opening a PDF. It's like, and now they're on the same network and you're copying files between them just to do anything. It really is it can be a bit painful, but it's fantastic from a privacy perspective because everything runs through a single router VM, and that you can put Tor on, and so everything's just locked down nicely out the box. There's very little that you need to do to lock cubes down further. Yeah, and then beyond that, like, I love Tor, I love I2P from like a network connectivity perspective. I love NordVPN on occasion where I need to use a VPN. More recently, I've been using Obscura, and big fan of like what they're trying to do there. They don't have as many sites as Nord, but they definitely have built a lot of cool stuff. Messengers come and go. I use Matrix quite a lot still. I've got a lot of friends and people on there. I've managed to get my family onto Signal and off WhatsApp, which has taken a while because my parents did not want to switch away from WhatsApp. Like, at least our family comms are a little more secure. Not that we're doing anything crazy as a family, but like, I don't really want anyone knowing like when I'm going to go visit my parents, like, again, like, that's just information that doesn't need to be that public. I think the only other thing that I want to call out from like a freedom perspective is there's a debit card called Pay, Payy, and it is a crypto-backed card. So you literally store whatever Tether, and you get dollars for your Tether in a Ethereum style account, an ERC20 EVM style account that you have the private key for. So, if Pay disappear tomorrow, you can just go suck the money out. And they give you a card, and they, because of the zero knowledge infrastructure there, they can't tell what you're swiping the card for. And I think it's just an added level of like protection. It's not perfect. It's still physical banking system rails. I'm sure that there's a bunch of stuff that they could see if they really wanted to. But it's, I've chatted to some of the folk there. They do a pretty decent job. And the really cool thing about this is like a little bit geeky, but the card has no numbers or name on it. And so the way that you get this card that arrives, like the physical card, I use it through like Apple Pay and Google Pay and whatever, but like you get the physical card that arrives, and then you like connect it on an app on your phone, like a Bluetooth LE app, and over BLE, it then programs the card to work on NFC, because there's no mag stripe. It's only NFC. It's only tap to pay. And so the idea is you can like change your card number, and that physical card you can just reprogram with the new number. Or you can, if you lose your card, like, it's no problem. Like, you don't need to cancel anything, because no one can. You can just cancel the physical card, but you don't need to like change the card number on every single site you've signed up for that has to like, charge the card every month. And the last cool thing that card does is when you tap, the little Pay logo in the middle lights up. It's like NFC activated light up logo, which is super geeky, but I absolutely love it. So yeah, I would say that those are the big parts of the stack that I use. Happy to delve into like any other aspects or anything I missed out.
Yeah, that was an excellent rundown. I've got a number of new browser tabs open for me to do some deep dives on some of the stuff that you mentioned there. This stuff with Purism was wild. I had no idea they even offered that as a service. That's excellent. And Also, not heard of Vola before, but it looks like they do tablets as well, which is interesting. So I'm definitely going to check them out as well after this. We are over time for Freedom Tech Friday, guys. So if you did join us just for that portion of the show, we are going to wrap up here, have a brief 3-minute break where there's a couple of videos for you to keep you occupied. If anybody needs to run to the bathroom, now is your opportunity. We will be back in about 3 minutes for the Monero monthly portion of the show, and Seth is going to be driving. So we'll catch you in a couple of minutes. Thanks, guys.
Thank you for listening to Freedom Tech Friday. To everyone who boosted, asked questions, and participated in the show, we appreciate you all. Make sure to join us next week on Friday at 9 a.m. EST and 2 p.m. London. Thanks to Seth, Max, and Q for keeping it ungovernable. And thank you to Cake Wallet, Foundation, and my NIM box for keeping the ungovernable misfits going. Make sure to check out ungovernablemisfits.com to see Mr. Crown's incredible skills and artwork. Listen to the other shows in the feed to hear Kareem's world-class editing skills. Thanks to Expatriotic for keeping us up to date with boosts, XMR chats, and sending in topics. John, great name and great guy, never change and never stop keeping us up to date with mining news or continuing to grow the mesh to Dell. Finally, a big thanks to the unsung hero, our Canadian overlord, Jordan, for trying to keep the ungovernable in check and for the endless work he puts in behind the scenes. We love you all. Stay ungovernable.
The business will fall victim to a ransomware attack every 11 seconds.
I am an investigator.
Delisted.
And I work supporting the IRS CI ACDC team.
Delisted.
Our agenda for today, we're going to start with just the basics of Monero, what it is, how it works.
Monero is considered a privacy token,
The world's most private privacy.
which means that it hides virtually all transaction details.
The world's most private privacy.
Delisted from another exchange. Delisted.
Which allows cyber criminals.
Monero is now definitely the most well-known privacy coin.
The world's most private privacy.
Delisted from another exchange.
Regulated exchange token is not listed due to regulatory concerns.
Delisted from another exchange.
Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me?
I'm losing already.
How good is that
Welcome.
new intro?
Welcome. Goodness gracious. That was worth the 589 hours you spent on that one, Max. That turned out so well.
Just shy of 589, but nearly there. Was everyone else's glitching though? I thought my internet died.
How so?
It was just like glitching the whole time on my side. I don't know why.
No, it was smooth as butter on mine.
Same.
Okay, perfect. Well, anyone who is joining us now and wasn't with us for Freedom Tech Friday, welcome to Monero Monthly. I think is this episode 13, it must be. It is our first live show. We're joined again by Ricardo, which is awesome to have you on. It was probably my favorite Freedom Tech Friday we've just recorded. We had like 12 questions lined out. We asked 3, you covered all 12. The easiest guest we've ever had. So thank you for that. And
I appreciate that. You know, I mean, there's so much to talk about. We probably could have gone on like another hour, and so I kept having to like curb myself.
No, it was awesome. And obviously now Monero Monthly, we're going to be going more specifically into the Monero stuff, but never a better time to cover this kind of thing. As I mentioned before in Freedom Tech Friday, I'm newer to really using Monero. First started in 2017, then dropped off. And it was really not until the Samurai arrests that I started more heavily picking Seth's brain and starting using this. And it's become basically what I use all the time for payments now, which if you'd have asked me a few years ago, that never would have been the case. So I think I'm not alone in that. We're starting to see more and more people join this show, asking questions. A lot of the time it's still in DMs because they want to still be the Bitcoin maxis and not be outed and all that kind of stuff. But there's definitely a shift. So yeah, awesome to have you on. And I think what we're planning to do with this show is Seth's got some questions that are too long for my dyslexic brain to read. And then after those, we'll go into some of the listener questions. Anyone who asks questions live is going to get preferential treatment. And then we've got lots that are pre-submitted as well. We also did a giveaway for a free Samurai hat, and I think we were going to choose live, weren't we, our favorite question? So we'll let you choose your favorite question, Ricardo, and someone can get a free Samurai hat. So that's the lineup.
Let's do it. Let's jump right in. So I figured for this one, I thought a cool subject would be for us to kind of turn back the clock and look back at the history, the start of Monero. So we've covered that on the show. I kind of walked through these same 4 Reddit posts that were so useful to me when I got into Monero to figure out like what happened in the early days, because there's a lot of weird convoluted stuff that went down, just like with any project. But I think Monero has had some uniquely odd things happen over the course of the first few years. So we've gone over a lot of the history already on the show, but I would really just kind of love to pick your brain and get some insight from someone who is actually there. And the first question that jumped out at me, just you were one of the early people actually looking at the code, trying to figure out like, is this something interesting? What is the CryptoNote protocol? Trying to really see like what's going on here. And you had mentioned in a Reddit post that had blatant and obvious obfuscations, no comment. There was a lot of weirdness with how the code was actually written. What was your first impression when you dove into the Bitcoin and then the Monero code base to get a sense of like, is this a useful, legit project or not?
Yeah, I mean, so like right at the beginning, it was very like, firstly, I want to just state outright that I am not a very good C++ developer. I hate C++ for, most things. So I was already like, oh God, I gotta like read through C++. And this is naturally predating like AI tools that could have maybe helped. And, when you're looking at a code base for the first time, the way that I tend to approach it is like, I mostly go, oh, here's a thing I want to change. Even if it's just text, even if it's just like the phrasing of something is weird. And then I grep the code base and I find where it is and I make the change and I learn through doing. And I was at that point a lot more familiar with Bitcoin's code base. So I was like, firstly, I was expecting a Bitcoin fork. And then I very quickly realized that it was nothing like Bitcoin. Like that was a bit of a surprise. And it had no comments. Like, that was super weird, you know. Like, I'm looking through the code, and I'm expecting comments, and the comments had literally been stripped out, because I can't imagine anyone is able to develop a code base of that size with no comments. Like, that makes no sense to me. So there was that sort of got my spidey sense tingling a little bit, because why strip out the comments on open source? And you know, you go through the Git history, you're like, well, obviously, like, the comments must be in the Git history. No, they don't exist. And the Git history was, you know, it was like 3 commits or whatever. It was like initial commit, first commit, whatever. That was it. And then like a handful of things past that, and that was the entirety of Bitcoin's code. And this is before Monero existed. This was, you know, like this is when they were trying to create the impression that Bitcoin had been around for many years. We were just discovering now. And so you're looking through this code and you're reading the CryptoNote white paper, and you're trying to, like, you know, you read stuff in the white paper, and then you try and find it in the code base, and that doesn't exist because not everything in the white paper was implemented, especially around like some of the programmable bits. And so it was a little bit like confusing. And then, you know, the counterpoint was true too. Like, the white paper has, if memory, I mean, I haven't looked at it in ages, but if memory serves, the white paper basically says on proof of work mining that, like, egalitarian proof of work is very important. And that's it. It just doesn't go into how they're going to do that, you know, or like how it should work. They're just like, oh yeah, you know, proof of work should be egalitarian. One CPU, one vote. We can all agree on that. Hey, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, shake hands. You know, and then it's like you would expect like detail on, and this is how we do it. But they did have a whole CPU bound, a reasonable attempt at it at the time, a CPU bound mining algorithm. So, you know, again, like, just no comments, and you sort of, it was very confusing. So one of the first things I did, because like, I'm not a cryptographer. Yeah, I've got familiarity with it, but I'm not a cryptographer. So one of the first things I did was I decided I needed to understand the cryptography, and maybe we as a community needed to understand the cryptography. And so I started a hunt for somebody to help me with that. And during all of this, you know, Thankful for Today launches Monero. So, you know, like, we're very weirded out by Bitcoin's 80% that's already mined, which ostensibly has happened over many years. And on the dark web, all of this is sort of happening simultaneously. So, you know, it's not, this is not a linear recollection. But I go out and I'm like, I need to find a mathematician and, you know, or cryptographer. So I go into Reddit, and I think it was, there's like 3 subreddits for finding work. And, you know, you can post like jobs there, but you can also post your own profile if you're for hire. So I go and I search the subreddit for cryptographer, you know, those sort of things. And there's like nothing. There's like one post from some dude that's like 3 months old. And he's like, you know, he's a post-grad. I think he's doing his doctorate at the time, might have been his master's, at some university in the US. And, you know, he's willing to do anything. He's willing to lecture, whatever. And so I reach out and I'm like, hey, I have a white paper and I want it annotated. And it's like cryptography. And he's like, look, I'm not the best cryptographer. That's not what my degree focused on. That's not what I specialize in. But I do have a good friend at university who is more of a cryptographer. And so, you know, because as I said, it's a paid gig. And so he was like, would you be averse to like both of us doing it, and then we both get paid? And so I'm like, yeah, that's fine. And so we negotiate the rate, and I want to say it was like $500 or something like that for both of them to annotate the CryptoNote white paper. So those two that annotated the CryptoNote white paper, that was Saray and Sarang, the very first two members of the Monero Research Lab. And I lucked into finding them on Reddit. And I'm pretty sure I can even go find that conversation in my Reddit chat, my message history. Yeah, it was so, and then of course, then it became like a thing, you know, they had to like understand, they didn't know anything about Bitcoin either. So they had to like understand all this stuff. And it was so fascinating and I think useful to all of us to have them come in from a pure cryptography and math perspective with not burdened by Bitcoin and the Bitcoin, you know, the history that had been till then, like 6 years of Bitcoin history, 5 years, I guess. But come in with fresh eyes and write this whole annotation, like set of annotations on the white paper.
Yeah, absolutely crazy. I actually had no idea that was how both of them got started. Like, obviously, I've known that they were a part of MRL for a long time and I've gotten to know Aaron specifically pretty well, but I had no clue that that was how it happened. Like a Reddit job posting, you track down two cryptography students and Fiverred them into annotating
pretty much
the white paper.
And it was like virtually like that. Then I'll tell you another anecdote. So I had to go to Utah because my business partner at the time was in Utah, and this would have been like, man, I can actually look at my photos and tell you exactly when it was. So I went to Utah in November 2014. And so I say to Brandon and Aaron, I'm like, hey guys, I've got to come through to Utah. I would love to fly you guys up for the weekend, and then we can hang out and talk Monero. And so, you know, they're like, okay, cool, no problem. This is like such a great idea. And probably, I'm trying to think like when it happened. It must have been like 2 weeks before then. I get this this kid emailing me and saying like, you know, he wants to get involved in Monero research, and I think I have a feeling that Greg had just published the confidential transactions paper, if memory serves. But in any event, I say to him, the kid's Shen. Okay, this is Shen that did the Ring CT paper. He says to me like he wants to get involved, and I'm like, I'm coming to Utah because he's also in the States. I'm like, I'm coming to Utah, and I'm flying like the two MRL guys. Well, you know, these two cryptographers up for the weekend. Do you want to come too? And he's like, okay. So now I fly like the three of them up to Utah, and it's myself, my partner at the time, and you know, we're like hanging out with my business partner there, and we're going, like, he's taking us to all the cool spots in Utah, which, you know, very hard to find alcohol there, as I learned. Very hard to find caffeine too. But, you know, that aside, he took us to really cool places. We went and like did a bunch of walks in the canyons. We went to Zion National Park, which was incredible. And we're hanging out and like talking crypto and whatever. And so then, you know, we rented a car. So then the one day, I think it was like because they all arrived on the Friday and left on like the Sunday or the Monday. So on the Saturday, we decide that we're going to go out to go get lunch. And my business partner's like, nah, you know, he's got some stuff that he needs to do with his kids. So he's like, take my Audi. It's an Audi TT. I'm like, okay, but there's like 5 of us, you know, and an Audi TT is not a big car. So there's like myself and Brandon in the front, and then like my partner and Shane and Aaron at the back. And I don't know how we managed to all pile into the TT, but we managed to make it work. Everyone basically sitting on top of each other. And we're driving on the highway to get lunch, and the car runs out of gas. So we like pull over to the side because I did not check. I didn't bother looking at the gas gauge. I don't know. I just assumed it had gas in it. And so now, like, the five of us are like, we abandoned the car on the side of the road to walk down the off ramp to go find a petrol station, a gas station, and like fill up a thing with gas so we can walk all the way back and like fill the car up, and like get going again. And it was the best bonding experience between us. I mean, like running out of gas on the highway and like having to go walk to fill it up was awesome. And that was the start of the MRL.
So half of the Monero team for the first 2 years piled into one Audi TT and then stranded on the side of the road. Imagine what could have happened.
We would never have had Ring CT or like a whole bunch of things if like we had died on the side of the road running out of gas.
Yeah, yeah. It could have turned south quickly, all in the middle of Utah. Could have gone down. Man, those are awesome. I had not heard either of those at all. I had no idea about that origin story. I love hearing that kind of like, I don't know, those anecdotes that people don't understand about the background of Monero, and just like that's real people actually making this stuff. One of my other questions that I'm curious if you have any other kind of like highlights, but since you were involved so early, you got the chance to really engage with Monero OGs, some famously, some infamously, like Thankful for Today, Smooth, Taco Time, EIZH. I know there were a few others that were kind of critical in the very early days, especially of the Bit Monero and then Monero forks and launches. Any memories or highlights that jump out at you from those early days, working with those people and just kind of going through that Bitcoin, Bit Monero progression, figuring out Thankful for Today and what to do with him, and just I know there was a lot of drama that happened then, but curious if anything jumps out at you.
Yeah, I mean, so Thankful for Today, like my interactions with him were mostly on Bitcoin Talk, and he was fine at the beginning. I never made the no one made the connection that he was like, just a Bitcoin like sock puppet account. And then we had this discussion where he's like, Monero needs to be merge mined with Bitcoin. And we're like, no, that's a terrible idea. Like, why would we do that? It's idiotic. Like Bitcoin's like 80% pre-mined. No one wants Bitcoin, and we certainly don't want Bitcoin miners getting Bit Monero. Like Bit Monero is like, it's like a relaunch of Bitcoin. Like, this is great. Let's just leave it as is. And he's like, no, it's really important. And so now we're having this back and forward. And so he says, what if we used the miner version, as in MINOR, version number on blocks as a voting mechanism? And so miners can choose to set the version, the block version, to indicate whether they support this or not. And then we'll tally up the votes after a few days or a week or whatever it is, and that will then tell us what miners want to do. Do they want to be merge mined or not? So we're like, okay, cool. That's totally fair. We love that idea. So he goes and he puts a new version out, and he sets the default to yes vote to merge mining. And we're like, bro, are you for real? Like, you can't do that. That's ridiculous. Like, we don't know if miners even read the forums or IRC or whatever. Like, you can't do that. And so we have this like whole argument with him, and then he relents, and the default was changed to abstain. So there was a third value that was added. And I think, I can't remember the numbers, but like it was overwhelmingly against merge mining. And, if it was today, they probably would have gone and like spun up a ton of AWS instances to try and like swing
1,000 new miners join the network.
Exactly.
Yep.
But we just had too much mining power collectively than they could muster. And so he, like, when the results were in, I think it was like over a weekend or whatever, and it was like the Monday. The results were in. It was clearly everyone was against it. Nobody is voicing a positive opinion on RSE. We already realized that Bitcoin Talk was like pretty sock puppeted, so a lot of the conversation was happening there. And he was like, well, kind of screw you guys. Like, I don't really care what the vote says. I think we should do this anyway, so I'm going to do it. And that was the tipping point. That was the point where, like, a bunch of us basically like started a secret little group chat in a separate channel. I think it was called like Bitmonero-fork or something. And we were like, hey, so I think we need to fork the code base and, like, not support whatever change he makes. And so like, one of the people that really spearheaded that and drove it from a human perspective was David Latapi, who subsequently committed suicide. And David was not a cryptographer. He was not a developer. He wasn't even really an IT person. He was very big into like post-humanism and biohacking and that sort of thing. But he's this a lovely French guy. And he was the one that really corralled us and was like, we need to do this. And, when like myself and Taco Time and Smooth and whoever, like, we were quite reluctant to do anything like that. But David pushed us and we're like, okay, I guess we should do it. And David went and registered Monero.cc, which was the first Monero website or domain. And we all, like, collectively sort of decided that we should fork it as Monero instead of Bitmonero. And so we did the fork and told Thankful for today that, like, we're going to maintain this fork without any merge binding changes. And he was just angry with us. He was not a happy camper, but it was the right move. And I'll tell you one other anecdote about that. So when you fork something on GitHub, it doesn't show up in search. So for many months, if you searched for Monero, you found Bitmonero. And I had to get hold of GitHub support, which is like, it's GitHub. Like, this is prior to the Microsoft acquisition, but still, like, getting hold of GitHub support was nearly impossible, and beg them to disconnect it so that it lived as a project on its own instead of a fork. And I had to, like, bully them into it, and they eventually did. And so that's why Monero does not show as a fork of Bitmonero, which is what it did show as initially.
Okay, I had no idea how that had happened, because since it is a code fork, it gets a little funky there. So fascinating you were able to pull that off.
Yeah.
You hit on mining there. I know that goal had been merge mining, but there was another weird part of mining in the early days of Monero that I think you were involved in fixing, which was this, like, discovery essentially that it seemed like the original authors had intentionally crippled the mining side of Monero. Once that was discovered, you all were able to optimize it and make it much better. But, like, what was the state of mining when you first got involved in the project? And what were some of the kind of the key changes or, like, discoveries that you all made as a part of that?
Yeah, so I was one of the first miners. I think the earliest block I mined must have been, like, block 10 or so. It was, like, really, I was there at launch. And that's all I really wanted to do, by the way. I just wanted to mine it. I didn't really care about anything else. I was fascinated by it from a coding perspective, from a code perspective, and the fact that it did things differently to Bitcoin. But I was 2014 was a time when Feathercoin and Vertcoin and all of these things were launching. And if you mined one of these things early on and you waited like 3 months and sold, you made a bunch of money. So I was like, cool, I'm just going to mine and then sell. And I had like a bunch of, I had GPU mined Bitcoin before Art4's, or with Art4's client before ASICs came around. And I spent money on Butterfly Labs ASICs, which is a whole another waste of time and effort to talk about. But I had all these GPUs that at that point, I think I was mining Feathercoin with them. I'd mined Litecoin as well. And so I just wanted to direct like the GPUs at mining them, but like it was CPU only. So I fired up like an AWS, whatever the big cluster, a C.8 or whatever the big CPU cluster or CPU server is, VM. And I was like, I'm going to mine on this thing. You know, it's going to cost me like $1,000 for the month, but like I'm going to mine on this thing. And that was all I wanted to do. And so I'm mining, and you know, you sort of see your speed, and you can see like you can calculate the network hash rate. And so, you know, I think I was like at the beginning, I was like 2% of the hash rate. I was like, oh, 2% of the hash rate with one AWS C.8 VM. I was like very proud of that, you know. And then Arthi, who was also one of the original Monero core team members, after about a week, says to me, there's a faster miner. And I'm like, how do we get it? And he's like, I don't know, but someone's created a faster miner. I'm like, well, we need to get it. Like, can we pay someone for it? And he's like, no, but like, you know, we can, let's get in a group chat. So we get in a like a channel on IRC, and it's like myself and Arthi and Noodle Doodle and Taco Time. And Noodle Doodle was the one that discovered like this big increase. And I'm expecting, because I'd been in that world, in the mining world for a while, and you know, like when I was mining with Art4's GPU miner, like everyone was trying to eke out gains, but the gains were normally like, I think the biggest gain I ever got was like a new miner that was like 15% faster. And this, like Noodle Doodle's miner was like 150% faster. Wow. Or something absurd like that. And I was like, how is it an order of magnitude faster? That makes no sense. And Taco Time's like, you know, we're like badgering Noodle Doodle because he just wants to give us the binary. He doesn't want to tell us how. And so eventually he like relents and he tells us like, no, there's an inner loop that's computed on every single pass, but the value never changes. So you only need to compute that once outside the main loop. Otherwise, it's like a gigantic waste to recompute that every single time the loop runs. And I was like, I mean, that like there's a level of sophistication in this code base. I can't imagine that change being, I mean, that code being accidental. Like the crypto night mining algorithm was created from scratch, and the person who created it, who wrote that implementation, surely like they knew that value doesn't change every time you run the loop. And there were a couple of people that discovered this simultaneously, because we saw within a space of like 48 hours, like the hash rate just went through the roof. And so, you know, and of course there's an article that I forget the guy's name that he wrote about finding similar things, that and other things, you know, and improving the miner. But it just became a race then, because then we realized that they had purposely hampered mining in order to enhance their ability to mine, in order to amplify their hash rate. And then it became a race to dig into the mining code and really find every single tiny thing that you can eke out of it. And this happened in, I mean, we're talking about maybe the first 10 days of Monero's existence, where all of this is happening, where we're all just like, you know, this happened so quickly. So there was, if anyone benefited from it more than anyone else, it would have been the CryptoNote scammers, because they had access to that, you know, to the more powerful mining code from launch, and the rest of us scaled linearly. You know, I started off with one AWS C8 VM, and I think I had 10 within a few days. I was like, I don't care about how much it's going to cost me. I want to mine as much as possible. So, you know, it was, for all that they had maximized their potential, I think they underestimated the veracity of that early mining community, And so they didn't actually get that much out of it. They maybe got at the time, maybe they managed to get a few 100,000 Monero in that early mining period, which they definitely dumped in order to try and keep the price down the minute it hit the first exchange, which was exchange.to.
Yeah, that's one of the beautiful things about it not just being a pump and dump is there's actually people who were involved with it who wanted to fix it and find ways to make it better. And also just one of the huge benefits of proof of work specifically for launching a new network like that is inevitably those funds are going to be sold back very quickly for people to recoup their spend on hardware, their spend on AWS rentals, whatever it is. So it works out well for Monero at that point. I do have I have a million questions we could go through. I'll end with one last one, and then I'll let Max jump into some listener questions that we have for you because I want to make sure we have time for that. But I think my last kind of general question for you is you've been in Monero from almost day one until now. How do you feel about how Monero has evolved over the years? What are you really excited about moving forward? Just kind of maybe a state of the union style. How are you feeling about Monero after having been along for the ride the whole time? I think you have a very unique perspective.
When at the beginning, when especially just after the fork, I remember having conversations with Taco Time and Smooth in particular, and I'll say, of all the people that were involved in Monero early on, Smooth has had the absolute best OPSEC. He is Satoshi level OPSEC for everything that he has sent me via email, for being on my own private IRC server where I could see his IP address and everything. I have absolutely no idea who he is, where he lives, what time zone he's in. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. He has been so principled with that. I'm not saying he's Satoshi, but man, that level of control and principle over your OPSEC in 2014 is impressive to see. But I remember having conversations with them shortly after the fork. And I had this little realization where I was like, this could actually be something. This could be up there with Tor and and I was close to the ITP guys at the time as well. I was like, this could be a real tool for change, for freedom, for improving the lives of people. And that, because Bitcoin at the time was yeah, Bitcoin will add privacy, but when? This could help people now. And I think Monero has delivered on that, in such a big way. It has resisted insane attacks. And I don't just mean technically sophisticated attacks or well-resourced attacks from state-level attackers, but it has resisted attacks that are so conniving and require very careful thought to deploy. And I have seen at least several of them, but at least one instance that comes to mind of a Monero contributor that started off with positive contributions and then very quickly became incredibly divisive, tried to sow all sorts of discord amongst contributors, tried to call every contributor into question, made things so challenging. He's literally the only contributor that as a group we have just all ejected. And now he moderates the Zcash Reddit. So, there's that.
I
But,
ran
you
into
know-
him this week. I forgot
Yeah.
he existed, quite honestly. And I was like,
I know.
oh, you're like, you lead the Zcash subreddit
Yeah.
and can ban anyone. Okay.
Exactly. Yeah, we I think it's but to start off in as a positive contributor where we're like, welcome new contributor, give us a virtual hug on RSC, and to cement yourself and then go that bad, and like for Monero to survive that, I think was, especially because it was pretty relatively early on in Monero's growth. I think he got involved in like 2016. And yeah, I mean, like to see Monero survive that, to see Monero survive all sorts of other sophisticated attacks, really, it is very, very impactful to me to see that and to know that the work that we did on Monero has paid out in large sums in terms of the people it has helped. And I've had people come up to me at conferences and tell me their stories about Monero. I had a lady who was in a domestic abuse situation, and she tried to store some money in Bitcoin, and her partner discovered it, and she realized she needed to get even more sophisticated than that. And that's not to say that she couldn't have gotten more sophisticated with Bitcoin. I don't think he had magical insights into like chain analysis stuff, but the process of going, I need to be more private, even more private with this, and her finding Monero, her learning about it, her figuring out how to acquire it, how to store it in a more private manner. I think that was incredible to hear, because she, like Monero affected her life and helped her to get out of a horrendous situation. And that story and some others that people have told me over the years about what Monero has done for them, that sits with me, and it makes me realize, like, hey, we did it. We did the thing. We built a tool that has helped people to regain control of their privacy and freedom in authoritarian situations and regimes, and that's all. That's what it's supposed to do. It was never
freedom tech.
Yeah, it shouldn't. It started off as a way to enrich a bunch of Russian cyber criminals, and the world co-opted it for good. And that I think is a unique story in this space.
Yeah, it's awesome. Like I say, it's proper freedom tech, and it just works out the box. And it's incredible hearing those sort of stories. And it's been awesome to hear the history as well. Like me and Seth, I think on our first episode we ever did, we went through the history of Monero, but it missed some of those excellent stories you just told. So they're real clippable ones. We are running up to time, so I did want to just answer or go through the questions for you to answer from our listeners. If anyone wants to ask any questions live, they'll jump to the head of the queue. But I'll kick things off with BTC Wrestle. He messaged on Noster and said, are Monero delistings actually positive? Despite demand, they push more to P2P economy, forcing users to transact via peers and dexes. Could this be a net benefit if it encourages real-world decentralized use at scale?
Yeah, I mean, I am of the opinion, look, at the beginning when the delisting started to happen, I was very I was not happy that was happening. I mean, I was like, this is going to reduce access for people and so on. On consideration and being, like a bit down the line now, I think it's done two things. The first is it has absolutely pushed people towards decentralized services and tools. It's also pushed people towards, I mean, like honestly, getting onboarded with Monero is not difficult. You can buy some Bitcoin or Tether or whatever, and you can use a KYC-free swap service to get into Monero. So it's not like it's even that challenging to do in a centralized way. So they kind of haven't stopped much, and so I also think that's been quite good to see the futility of those attempts. And I'm grateful that the lessons that the community has taken has not been, well, we should just give up. But the lessons they've taken from that are, we need to take this and be stronger, and I think that's exactly that's what I hoped it would achieve. When I started thinking about potential benefits to delistings, and that's where we're at now. I mean, like, more focus, more attention on decentralized systems, atomic swaps, that sort of thing. Like more effort and work on getting Monero on dexes, and that's great. That's perfect.
Yeah, absolutely agree. Like, seeing this as someone who was much more heavy on the Bitcoin side until sort of the last year, 18 months, the amount of pushback from the Monero community and the sort of fighting spirit that I see out there is really, really cool to see. Like, it makes me more interested in using the tech. It's like a not giving up, not being discouraged. And it was also a signal to me as like, okay, if these delistings are going to happen, it's obviously for a reason, and that's probably because this stuff works. And that was something that really has pushed me further down into use, and I think probably a lot of other people as well. So great question, BTC Wrestle. Thanks for that one. A question from Ava on Noster. Monero survived longer than almost any privacy tech in a hostile regulatory environment. What's the single design decision or cultural norm that's made that possible? It's kind of on the same lines, but...
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's actually a few things that really have played into Monero surviving or having a culture of survival. The first is we made a decision really early on, it was something that I personally pushed for really hard. I was very, very sick and tired at the beginning of 2014 already of the Bitcoin subreddit being almost entirely price focused. And so when I with the Monero subreddit, when we were putting together the list of rules, and I think it was myself, Taco Time, Roland, which is DNA Leo backwards, and a few others, like when we were busy like figuring out these list of rules, and DeBrain as well, then I was like, guys, we need to say no price talk. That's just, it's got to be a rule. And the net effect of that has been a bigger focus on the technology and on, like all these other aspects. And there is no price talk on RSC. There's no price talk on Reddit. It carries through in so many aspects of Monero's culture, and it creates a, like no one cares if the price goes up or down, because it's just not an aspect. It's not a thing that gets spoken about. There are venues for that if you want to go talk about it, but it's not in the main venues that people are exposed to. So that already means that the negative, oh my God, I lost so much money, all of those posts that you often see, which push people away, those aren't there. So that alone makes a massive change People can talk about delistings, but they can't talk about the price impact of delistings because price talk is discouraged or is banned. So, all of this just means that people have to focus on a different part of it than like, oh, I want to get rich, price go up. So that's a big component. And then the other thing is, I had a very flippant attitude towards a lot of people and a lot of things as a lead maintainer. And I think that helped build a culture of we don't owe anyone anything. Like, the only thing that we as contributors owe is the knowledge that what we are doing is working on a piece of software that is responsible for people's money, people's privacy, and sometimes people's lives. And so we need to take great care with the software. But beyond that, we don't owe anyone anything. And even within that, we don't owe people anything. We don't owe you security for your money. Like, that's not our job. Like, we do our best, but we are unpaid contributors. And so people would say like, oh, when is this happening? And I go, soon. And that would just be, 2 weeks. That would be like the default response. And people need to stop asking because like it was we made like joke roadmaps. Like, I think it's like still 3 or 4 roadmap, like fake roadmaps for Monero from like 2015, 2016. We made memes out of things like roadmaps because you can't have a roadmap like that in open source software because things change, And so all of these different traditions and cultural things and I'm not responsible for them. I contributed to them along with others that reinforced them, that formed sound bites. Things like the "Don't buy Monero unless you have a use for it" sound bite. That I used to, like, every single podcast I went on, I was like, "Don't buy Monero, don't buy Monero, don't buy Monero." And that became that became a cultural thing on its own. Like, all of this has made Monero incredibly robust and anti-fragile. It is the most anti-fragile cryptocurrency that I am aware of. And I say that with all due care, but it is, from a cultural perspective, it is more anti-fragile than Bitcoin.
Yeah, it's the culture around Monero that I see is similar to the kind of 1 or 2% of Bitcoiners that, like me and Q and Seth and people, tend to interact with, who do care about privacy, who do care about freedom. But the other 98 is incredibly fragile, actually. It's like the most fragile community, so it's refreshing to see. This again kind of leads on from what you were just talking about. It's a question from Giallo XMR. Can you ask him if he's going to contribute as a dev for Monero in the future?
I mean, I guess the question is, how do you know I'm not contributing right now? That's the wonderful thing about about having a bunch of contributors who are pseudonymous and anonymous.
Great answer. I think we can leave it there, actually. Question from Victor asks how we can protect against future network attacks. Example, Cubic. Have the developers chosen a solution to selfish mining, and is there a timeline for when it might be implemented? I think me and you went through loads of these different options maybe 5 episodes ago. Is that right, Seth?
Yeah, we've covered it a good bit over the last few months, but curious if Fluffy has anything unique to add.
Yeah, I mean, nothing really to add apart from what you guys have covered. I think there's firstly, I think a selfish mining attack is, unless it is sustained in double digits, it's hardly an attack. And it's kind of like Cubic was really a joke, like. And we knew it at the time, but I think we all gave in a little bit to their attempts at creating a culture of fear and uncertainty, which happens. Like, they did a good job of marketing it. You have to give them that much. I would say the best solution, apart from things that will be done technically, the best solution as a community is we need to learn to differentiate between people who are engaging in good faith and people who are not. There are certainly going to be attacks in the future or things in the future where, as a community, we will, the fear will come up in us. And there will be people who are less technical who will, write things out of fear and say, I'm really scared and what's happening and can't the devs do something or whatever. And we have to be sympathetic and kind to them. But we also need to be able to weed out those that are trying to turn the conversation from that into something disastrous for Monero. People that, in the face of an attack, push for immediate action that is not backed by strong, sound technical principles. That's very dangerous. And we need to watch for that. Because as we saw with Cubic, frankly, if we just sat back and did nothing, it would have just died out on its own. And that's, we have had a lot of conversation about it, and I think we fed the fire. And I certainly engaged with a lot of the Cubic people. I wish I hadn't. I think a better thing would have been for us to all unilaterally block them on X and ban Cubic posts on Reddit and ignore it. And then, like when journalists reach out about claims they made, just go, well, that's not the case. Here's why. But that's never going to happen in a decentralized community. It's a wonderful pipe dream. But I do think we need to learn to just take a step back, calm down to a mild panic, give things a moment to play out. If there is any urgent action that needs to be taken, it will stem from existing contributors that have been around for years, not from some random, person who's been on Reddit for 3 minutes shouting from the rooftops.
Yeah, absolutely. We are running up to time. I know Q and Seth have got to jump, and Ricardo, I'm sure you've got things to do as well. This has been awesome. We have 2 more questions which we can wrap up with. One is from Matthew Kappa. As a regular EU citizen in 2026 with MICA, travel rule, KYC, 1,000 unhosted wallet checks, Monero delistings, fully traceable BTC, full dystopian world, how can ordinary people legally preserve real financial legally preserve real financial privacy? What simple steps still work today?
Yeah, I think I would love to be able to say that the best solution is regulatory arbitrage. And it is the best solution. Of course, the simplest solution for individuals and the best way to show the EU that they're being hostile is to take the taxes away from them by moving out. But I also recognize equally that for 90% of people, 99% of people, that's not possible. And a great lesson for me on this was, I have some developers that work for me that are Ukrainian. And when the war in Ukraine started, a lot of them left and they went to, Poland and other parts of Europe to obviously get out of a war zone. And one of my developers stayed, and I was like, you need to get out. What can I do to help? Do you need money? What can I do to help you get out of a war zone? And he said to me, my wife's parents are refusing to leave and we cannot abandon them. And it just goes to show, even if you are heavily motivated or highly motivated and you have the funds and you have the means and everything, you still might not be able to. So regulatory arbitrage, best case, but for most people where that's not possible, I do think that we're going to see an increase in underregulated or unregulated markets, and so you see this with within Islam, for example, like Muslims have got an entire separate monetary network, and that is, like something that is so Hawala, it's called Hawala, and Hawala is like entirely distinct from the regular financial system. Now, Hawala is pretty limited because a lot of it involves cash and so on, or it's relatively
phone
limited.
credits, isn't it? Something.
No. That's separate. That's a whole, that the phone credit thing that's a whole nother system.
Yeah.
But Hawala is basically a trust-based system where, you can have like your buddy in one country gives cash to someone, and then, like your buddy in this country can give you cash. Hawala is actually incredible because it is entirely like trust-based, and it's kind of wild, like from a religious perspective, you're not going to cheat the system, and so therefore the system doesn't get cheated. But anyway, point being that like the fact that regulations exist does not mean that humans are not going to figure out how to root around them. They're going to figure out how to root around them. Hawala exists to root around restrictions and limitations in parts of the financial system, as well as provide a system that is compliant from a religious perspective financially. So, because there's certain banking institutions where Muslims just won't bank with them, so then they can still use Hawala to operate. And the same thing's going to happen. If the EU continue to create a dystopian future, then people are just going to go underground with their messaging. They're Signal and WhatsApp and whatever will go off the App Store, and people will sideload and they'll use other apps, and eventually, like the EU is going to be shamed into opening things back up, because it's going to, like, from an external perspective, people are going to put pressure on them because it starts to go into like human rights violations territory.
Yeah, definitely. Leave if you can. If you can't, use the tools. Final question from Liberty Tools first. Why the Monero pump? We just said we're not talking about price, but here we go. Why the Monero pump? What are his thoughts? Second, what's the long-term goal of Tari? What separates it from projects like Solana or Ethereum? Fucking no idea. Before you answer that question as well, we need to choose a favorite question from the ones we've just had for someone to win the free samurai hat. So I'll leave that to you at the end, Ricardo, as well.
Okay, cool. So look, I don't know why the Monero pump. I have no idea why. I like to think that it's because people are starting to realize that privacy is important, but who knows? Maybe like somebody woke up one day and decided that Monero is a cool name. I will say this. The pump has not been preceded by a bunch of KOLs talking about Monero. And that is, it's akin to Bitcoin. When Bitcoin has had run-ups in the past, it's not been because a bunch of people speak about Bitcoin, a bunch of KOLs or whatever, or influencers are talking about Bitcoin, and then Bitcoin's price go up. It's the other way around. Bitcoin's price starts doing numbers, and then the KOLs go, "Oh yes, yeah, Bitcoin, yeah, we love Bitcoin," like as if they were always in on the inside track. So I think this is very similar. I've actually only seen one guy who I think it was a couple of months ago, said that he bought $3 million or $3.3 million of Monero, and then he posted the other day he's up, like, whatever his purchase is now with 5.5 or something, and that's kind of like, and he's not what I would call like a massive influencer, but that's the closest I've seen to anyone that's like influencer-ish talking about Monero in that context, and so that's kind of cool, to see that it is as Seth says, the inverse of Zcashes. which I also think potentially means more longevity. I'm certainly not saying that Monero's price isn't going to go back down to the magical $140 stablecoin level, but I do think it's probably more sustainable. And at any event, even if it's not sustained, this has brought attention to Monero, and I think that's useful.
We lost him just as he was going to have to talk about Solana
There we go.
and Ethereum.
He's back.
It was like your connection's been lost, and I was like, no. So on the long-term goal of Tari, so Tari exists for a few reasons, but I want to focus on three key aspects. The first is Tari exists so that people can stop asking for Monero to get smart contracts, because then you can just go, Monero is not going to get smart contracts for a number of reasons. The biggest one of which is it adds a degree of metadata to transactions that we do not want from a traceability perspective. So you can say, if you want privacy-focused smart contracts, go to Tari. So that's one. Secondly, it exists so that anyone who wants to contribute from a code perspective to a smart contract system and really does not want to contribute to Monero at all can pitch up and work on Tari. At least then those efforts aren't wasted. And we specifically built Tari in Rust so that we're not sucking C++ developers away from Monero. Now, obviously there is an effort to rewrite Monero in Rust, but that I think is still some time away from reaching a level of maturity where it can replace the Monero core software. And it might never, it's like rewrites have a tendency to sometimes not have sticking power, although I do hope it does, because I love Rust as a language. And the third thing is, I think there is a need for a different approach architecturally to smart contracts, and that's what we've been trying to do with Tari. Where transactions in the L2 are more ephemeral and less like let's store everything on a blockchain forever. Where there's still proof of work as the key security mechanism, where that proof of work includes merge mining for Monero, which is a positive for Monero's hash rate, and where ultimately a bunch of privacy-first decentralized applications will exist. And my hope is that those privacy-focused decentralized applications become beneficial to Monero by providing, there's all sorts of things that we can do, like atomic swaps or wrap Monero and whatever. So then you can start to open up Monero in a very decentralized way to perps and other applications that aren't possible on Monero without compromising on a centralization perspective.
Perfect. Well, thanks for going through those questions.
And then you wanted to know which question is the winner. That question on what aspects of Monero's culture have led to it being so robust. I love that question.
And that was Ava, is that right?
Yeah,
Ava
and Nostra.
Yeah, so Ava on Nostra, if you want to reach out to me, collect your free samurai hat, you can have it in dark mode or the samurai colors, either one you want. Just reach out and I'll get that sorted for you. So we're going to wrap up, but Ricardo, thank you so much for joining us. This has been awesome. I really enjoyed the Freedom Tech Friday. Good to have a live Monero as well. Listening to all the history of Monero has been amazing. So if for anyone who's joining towards the end of this, for those who can, because it looks like X has been down for about the last hour, you can join us in like a day or two. It's going to be on the Ungovernable Misfits feed. Thanks to Seth and Q and all the listeners for the questions and getting involved. This has been great.
Thank you all so much.
Awesome.
Absolutely a blast having you join us. Fluffy, hearing some unique tidbits from the history of Monero I had never heard of, even though I've been here a while and getting to pick your brain. So thankful for it.
Thanks so much for having me, gents. This was a lot of fun.
Thanks, Ricardo. Bye, guys.
The business will fall victim to a ransomware attack every 11 seconds.
I am an investigator.
Delisted.
And I work supporting the IRS CI ACDC team.
Delisted.
Our agenda for today, we're going to start with just the basics of Monero, what it is, how it works.
Delisted.
Monero is considered a privacy token,
The world's most private privacy.
which means that it hides virtually all transaction details,
The world's most private privacy.
Delisted from another exchange. Delisted.
which allows cyber criminals.
Monero is now definitely the most well-known privacy coin.
The world's most private privacy.
Delisted from another exchange.
Regulated exchange-listed token is not listed due to regulatory concerns.
Delisted from another exchange.
Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me?
I'm losing already.